Okay, stop. Stop. So, how did that go? What was the feedback? Tell me, guys. We could do that again for the auditory digital. I'm not going to make you do that. It's the least common way of somebody to talk, and it's often the hardest for somebody to get into, so we're not going to get into it. That said, which was hardest for you? So I've got auditory, I've got kinesthetic, I got visual.
How about all of them?
So it depends upon what you're talking about. Now, somebody want to share what was the hardest? Stand up and just talk to me for a couple seconds. Yes.
Yes, I was confused. I couldn't read the board. I learned a lot about him, considering I could not read that board.
So you couldn't read the board. Who could read the board that could do the exercise? Okay, right here.
Thank you.
All right. What?
Well, just for recording. So,
Yeah, this.
I had a hard time with kinesthetic words
Okay.
because I was describing my car.
Wonderful.
Yeah, but, okay, I can grasp that my car has a good feel and it's solid, has a nice touch.
Absolutely.
And,
Guess what?
And all that other good stuff, but some of these words were wild.
Oh, absolutely.
Describing my car.
You didn't have to go through and describe every one of these things, but just saying, look, you know, when you go inside and you grasp that steering wheel or that shift stick, when you reach over and touch the knobs or shift it into gear, when you feel the horsepower thrust you forward, when you are pushing down on the gas pedal, when you understand how quickly you can stop, when you feel how quickly you stop coming up to a stop sign. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so
I was in a 5.0 Mustang GT. I was like, yeah.
So you should have been describing
Somebody else's car.
well, no. You punch that gas, you go somewhere, don't you?
Yeah.
Does that make you feel something?
Sure.
Absolutely. When you corner, do you feel it?
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah.
I feel the seat hugging me.
So let me just pose something to you. This is probably the one you have the hardest time with because it's the one that you use the least. Now that said, who is your partner?
This young lady here.
Hi. How are you?
I'm fine.
Wonderful. When she was describing the car to you, using which three were you most excited about or did you most relate with?
Well, all of them had me think my mind going. All of them.
Perfect. Which one was the most comfortable for you to listen to?
One grasp.
This one? So kinesthetic.
Yeah.
So what you were least comfortable with, she was most comfortable with. You think that happens a lot? Absolutely. You think it's important that you know how to talk to somebody on all three of these levels? Yes. Absolutely. So, anyone else have a hard time with one of them in particular? Who hated visual? Despised it? Wow, that's not too bad. Auditory. It was the worst for me. Okay. Kinesthetic. Interesting. So most people like visual. So let me just tell you, most people are visual, by the way. It's about the same number that is a circle is also visual. You got about 60% of the world that is visual. Not necessarily. More times than not, though they are, because they're still driven by vision, they're still driven by that. So by default, the way that their brain works is they're hardwired to want to know what the big picture is and what it looks like. The other variables, the auditory and kinesthetic, those are pretty much evenly distributed. So, pardon?
Where are the Z's?
They're in the bar having a great time right now. Well, if you're up in your room, yeah. We won't get into that one. All right. So, was it constructive for you? Did you guys struggle through that? Right. It's something that unless you actually think about doing, you would never put yourself into that situation. But also, you've got to understand that some people, like Dinah bought her car. If I ever want to sell Dinah a car, how did she make her decision? Kinesthetic, visual. So that's how she's going to make the presentation. Anytime I'm going to talk to her about a car, it's going to be in that order. I'm going to touch on one big benefit, another big benefit, and another big benefit. You think if you elicit somebody's decision-making criteria for, I don't know, making big money-related decisions, that would be valuable to you? Absolutely.
It's funny, the government, I'm a Navy instructor, the government incorporates this too. Because they always tell us to, when we're teaching, to first describe, and then give it first describe, then show them, and then
There, Mike,
they can do
just
themselves.
so that this makes it into the recording. Not that. Awesome. Everybody, it's Dinah. Please say what you just said.
I'm a Navy instructor, and the government incorporates this because they always teach us when we're going through instructor facilitation courses to first describe, then to show, and then to have the students do the actual test. So they incorporate this method. And also, as a personal trainer, we incorporate this. We do they teach us the same thing. They say, first describe what exercise you're going to do. Show them the exercise, and then have them do the exercise.
Yep. Thank you for sharing. Okay, so we went through that. Who felt that they were absolutely, if I were to ask you right now, based off of your experience, who among you would say that you are primarily visual? Who would say you are primarily auditory? Primarily kinesthetic. Isn't that interesting? The ratios are a little bit stronger in terms of visual here, but holds true. You've got roughly the same percentage on both sides of audio and auditory and kinesthetic. So, rule number 4, like we talked about, know who you're talking with. Any questions on profiling? Any questions on NLP? Anything like that before I move on? Because that.
You know, could you, I guess I'm a little slower on this, because can you give me a couple of examples on each one? I mean, you're talking to a client, and you want to really be as close to their profile as possible. Could you please?
Sure. So again, like we talked about in terms of the circle, square, and triangle, right? So that person's going to ask you certain questions related to.
I call them up and I'm trying to get there.
Right, and so they're going to say things like, I just need to get a sense for how the process works. So now I'm a kinesthetic driven by process, right? So I hear what you're saying, but da-da-da-da-da. Well, now I know that I'm going to have to respond to them with an auditory response. That sounds to me like you're saying this. Is that correct? Yes. Okay. Well, what I hear you saying is you're going to do this, this, and this, or you need to know this, this, and this before you're comfortable proceeding. Is that right? Am I hearing you right? Am I understanding, et cetera, et cetera? And so now, because we're going back and forth on their wavelength, they're more apt to move forward because they feel like they've got rapport with you. Same thing with visual. Yeah, I can see this working, but I don't have a clear vision of how it's going to pan out. Okay. Well, let me see if I can clear that up for you. Let me take away all the fog and and give you a clear picture as possible. Let me, right now it sounds like we've got some muddy water we need to straighten up. I mean, you can throw as many things at this as you want, but when you do that, you feel like those people actually feel like they're communicated with. Does that make sense? Did I answer your question? Did I give you the examples you were looking for? Anything else?
Do you feel like you could go overboard with visual or auditory or kinesthetic?
I feel what you're saying. So the thing is this, as long as they're kicking it to you, you've got to kick it back. So it's basically, anytime somebody throws something out there like that, it's a touchstone. They're reaching out and going, talk to me, talk to me, talk to me. And then you're on the other side going, okay, here, here, here.
But if you go overboard, will it sound phony though? I mean, with the words and everything? Or?
Well, so you're using something natural. You know, I see what you're talking about. I feel what you're saying. You know, it makes sense. I mean, deep down, I grasp where your concern is coming from. That said, if I'm using words that are natural, are you going to feel like I'm throwing you overboard? Like I'm taking you down a direction that's going to get you all lost and confused?
No, unless you go excessive on the words or something.
Well, so, but if you throw one at me and I throw one back at you, are you overwhelmed?
No.
Now, if I keep harping on the same one, I start sounding like a used car salesman, right? So yes, you want to strategically use it, and yes, you want to use it in a way that moves the conversation forward. But can you overuse it? I would be surprised if you did.
Are there phrases like that to avoid any of these categories in approaching somebody?
Phrases to avoid in any category. You know, I would probably say no, in terms of there isn't something that's going to turn somebody off.
Yeah, but, or however.
There, I tend to like more yes ands, or well, that I can do some of that, or let me explain to you what I can do. But we're not getting into whether somebody is a visual, auditory, or kinesthetic. You're talking more now in terms of the philosophy of the conversation. So I think that there are times and places for a however. As a matter of fact, I think there's a however or two in my script. So and I don't think that they ever stop. It's when you're using them. So for example, if somebody expresses to you, this is my desire, and you say, well, yeah, that's your desire, but I'm not going to do that for you. Now I've taken away, and I've knocked down quite a bit of the rapport that I've spent so much time building. So in that regard, there are some things, but not necessarily in the NLP aspect of it. Does that make sense? Yes?
How do you cultivate an awareness of these communication patterns? Because
They
we
give
were
it to
doing
you.
an exercise and that was challenging enough. I can just imagine how hard it would be out there in real life.
Yeah, I can imagine it too. I can see exactly where you're coming from. But the more you listen, the more clear it will become in terms of what somebody is or isn't. Does that make sense?
Well, how do I cultivate an awareness?
Honestly, it just happens in the conversation. So you will say something to me, and I will be actively listening for auditory, kinesthetic, or visual words that you're throwing out. So, yes, please. He is a. Were you a triangle?
No, I was a Z.
You were a zero. Well.